Suicide for celluloid. I should just let you do all the legwork with these people. What a fantastic video. It's funny, these people, even if they're trying to hang on Paul, which they tried to, he says, work out your own salvation in fear and trembling. Kind of sounds like works to me. God, you should almost be an apologist for orthodoxy. That's fantastic. I think this is great. Even people who are not espousing to have a religion can know where the historic church is. Or at least, even if they don't think we hold to the same things that we used to, at least know that we're from that. I mean, I love that you added in the people who compiled this. Yeah, absolutely. It's been strange to me, because you don't have this in Islam. You wouldn't even have this in Judaism or any other spectrum of religion where people would get an idea. How do you fit? Because the church, Christianity, the church, there's really not a separating Christianity and the church, which I guess the West has done. It's how can you condense that culture into books? These books were traditions of the church, and it's funny when they do this because they have their own agenda. You see, they made up this kind of theology or philosophy of theirs, and of Calvin or Luther, and its reaction against Roman Catholicism. But it's still, it's funny, they still hold to Augustine, and they still hold to Anselm, whether they want to admit it or not, or whether even they know it or not. They still hold to these two guys. One guy was in the late Roman period, another guy was in the High Middle Ages, in the 11th century. Anselm of Canterbury with penal substitution. And they'll hold to this, because that's where they get the first idea of, penal substitution, substitutionary atonement, so then there's this. Which it can't be found in the Bible, but to them, since they're already primed for this, they read it into it. And then they can do all the mental gymnastics to get out of all these other inconvenient verses, right? So how you condense a culture, and that was never the idea. And as you mentioned, the statements of faith in the baptismal creeds were accepted before these works were accepted, before they bound them as canonical. And even at that point, it wasn't. This was decades even after the Council of Nicaea and they used the Council of Nicaea and what they had believed to measure against what should be in or what shouldn't be in. It was through the traditions. Okay, which ones have we used? What have we been using? In different areas had different scriptures, as they say, and people would be shocked as to when the actual New Testament was canonized, because it doesn't come until very, very, very late, even after the assembling of them. And for centuries, you had churches which may be out of communion now, but they were in communion. Some of them were using Third Maccabees. The Old Testament wasn't even codified. You had some churches that had the Apocalypse of Peter, Third Corinthians, and this wasn't a problem. Why? Because it wasn't. It didn't matter how much or how little, and even the stuff that wasn't read in church was still told to be read, and it was read in church, but it wasn't what would make it into the binding of the codices. I can't even say it, because it even did make it in there, but not into what might get called the official New Testament at a later point, like the Didache, Epistle of Barnabas. These things never went out of style. Now, we found a more ancient form of the Didache in the last 200 years, but we've always had it in its expanded form. And Epistle of Barnabas, Acts of Paul and Thecla. It's very funny. It's that they take these ideas, and you probably already know this. They already have their theology, and then they see how they can fit into the Bible. Why don't they say the Blessed Virgin Mary? That's straight out of the New Testament, the term. They won't use it. It's very inconsistent, because if they were to look at these things, they'd have to say, nobody ever believed this until, as you say, 500 years ago. And even with that, Calvin and Luther wouldn't have even really endorsed that so much, even though Calvin was endorsing that. He didn't act like it, and he didn't give his homilies and didn't speak like as if this is what he believed, because he had the preservation of the saints, so, or perseverance of the saints, so he had to, it was really strenuous. So this is when we say we look at Martin Luther as like a neo-Marcion, right? Because the body is totally separate from the spirit, or even like Calvin is a type of Valentinus, because you can't sin with the body. And we see this in the Ranters and in the Puritans. One sect will go off and say, I can do whatever I want, and I can drink and get drunk and do all this stuff and still be, because it's just my spirit that's saved. I don't care about the body. And the other ones will see the body's tomb and this and that, so they mortify it and go into these harsh ascetic things, and you can't ever sin, or that's proof that you were never saved. How the actual historic church, look, I'll just send this to the guy, how the actual historic church views faith is not in the modern Western way. It's faithfulness, it's loyalty, which combines both those things, which James was speaking against. Your loyalty towards God, right? If you don't have loyalty towards God, if you're not, which would entail belief and modern Western view of faith and all this kind of stuff, it's a contradiction in terms to be loyal and then not be loyal. It's ridiculousness. But if it's not just I believe, therefore that just helps me over anything. Essentially it's paganism. It's kind of like black magic. If you say these magical words and you hope against hope, like I was asking people about the historic church, these evangelical Protestants, or the historicity of Christ, and they don't know about any of that. Well, no, it doesn't depend on that. Science and history would disprove the Bible. Basically, this is what they think. Science and history would disprove the Bible, or even the mere existence of any Christianity in ancient times. Which, who the hell was Nero persecuting that? What did Constantine... But they say, well, we believe in the Bible. So it's almost like how the Muslims view the Quran. They almost believe in dictation. And I don't know, how do they know? If they think the Roman Catholic Church is so evil, which they got their scriptures from, the West got their scriptures from the East, then why would they trust anything in there? It's beyond belief. I'm Antiochian, from the city of Antioch, displaced in Damascus. We're in communion with others, and who says the canon has to be the same? Because that's never where belief came from. As you said, who compiled this? Because the New Testament did not exist, clearly did not exist for at least 300 years. I would go so far as to say 500-600 years. And if you want a canon, you have to get 1500. That's pretty amazing. 1500 years later. Because it was due to the Counter-Reformation, the Reformation started canonizing these. And then the East said, oh, as a reaction, we should canonize this. So the canon was... it wasn't canonized in the way we think it was. It was, oh, this is our tradition. So even viewing it as scripture and tradition is ridiculous, because scripture is the first part of tradition. And we could say, well, the Gnostics and the Marcionites, they have no say because they're not part of the church. And it's kind of silly to think you can pick up a book and read it, and then you're the church. And you can start, as if the church wasn't started only once. Could somebody pick up the Torah and then start forming theology or practice it in a way, and then say, oh, I'm part of Israel? No, you would have to go and join. I mean, if you look back then, you'd have to go and join the Israelites and be inducted by them and be circumcised or whatever and be part of them to be Israel. You couldn't just remanufacture it, right? So I would love to get in on this conversation, but I don't think I need to, because I don't know. I think it's awesome that people with knowledge like yourself can even look at this stuff and say, "This is what the hell is this?" Or they'll bash us for iconography, right? Oh, it's idols, it's idols. What do you do about Moses crafting graven and molten? I mean, they're carved and they're covered over in gold. The cherubim on the mercy seat of the ark, and then the bronze serpent. So obviously they had images, and they go much farther than we would ever dream to. But oh, you painted something, you wrote something in paint. That's an idol. Well, it seems like they always used images in worship. No, you can't. It's they kind of to even begin to. I mean, nobody even read the scriptures. The scriptures were written by the church for the church within the church. If you were not a baptized Christian, you did not see those for the first 300 years, because they had harsh persecution, and the books were hidden. This is why early on they considered a mystery cult. The Romans didn't know what the hell it is. They weren't let in on it. I gotta send this to this dude, because tell me who it is, and I'd love to. This is something that I struggle with all the time, and I ask these people, and they have no answers, because if they had an answer, if they had a real answer, something, even if they disagreed with me, something embedded in history, they still couldn't hold on to their manufactured. I mean, it's not even non-biblical; it's anti-biblical, as you showed out. I mean, the only time faith alone appears is followed by cannot save. The only time it appears in the New Testament, it's immediately followed by cannot save. Faith apart from works cannot save. And an atheist has to tell somebody a Christian, or maybe somebody who thinks they're Christian, what Christianity is. It's just sad. Man, I love rational atheists. I dig that. Take it easy. Peace to you. May God save Serbia, Syria, and Ireland.